Hey everyone, I'm Tristan and welcome to my workshop. A while back I made a Stormtrooper helmet, and since then a lot of you asked me if I would make the armor. So this video is the first of a 3-part series where I'll show you how to build, paint, and assemble your own Stormtrooper armor completely out of EVA foam. If you want to make this project, you can get the templates on my Etsy store, which is linked in the video description. But be quick, because for the first week after this video comes out, the templates will be at 25% off. So go get your templates and let's make a Stormtrooper armor. After purchasing and downloading the templates, you can print them out using the settings shown in my printing tutorial video. Let's start the build with file number 1 of the templates, which are for the shoulders, arms, and hand plates. As with all of my templates, trim off the border around each page before taping them together and cutting each part out carefully. You can use a craft knife or scissors for this step, and make sure to be accurate with your cuts. Once that's done, you should be left with these template pieces. I included 2 types of hand plates in the templates, the ones from A New Hope and the ones from the other movies. Take out 10, 8, and 5mm foam, and let's start tracing the templates on the foam. I use sewing pins to keep the paper in place and a silver sharpie to trace around the parts. Make sure you also transfer the registration marks and the lines on the pieces. After removing the paper templates, you can trace the lines properly and extend the registration marks into the parts. The parts that have this 2X logo on them need to be traced down, then flipped over and traced again. This will give you the parts for the left and right arm pieces. The shoulder bells have to be traced down twice, then flipped over and traced down twice again to get 4 parts. This part has dotted lines, which means it needs inward angle cuts. For now, just transfer the dotted lines on the foam part. You can also add the letters to the parts so you know how they go together later on. With all the parts traced to the foam, let's cut them out with a box cutter and a craft knife. Just like when cutting out the paper templates, take your time and be precise with your cuts. This piece from earlier needs 40-degree inward angle cuts. Simply angle your blade towards the piece and make your cuts. You should end up with this. Now let's assemble the armor, starting with the shoulder bells. I recommend rounding the edges of the 2 10mm trim pieces with a rotary tool to give them a cleaner look. After that, take out your heat gun and form the parts over a rigid, rounded object. I'm gonna use contact cement to glue all of the armor pieces together because it's the strongest gluing method for EVA foam. Make sure you wear a respirator when using this glue because it's one of the worst things to breathe in. The way you use contact cement is you apply it to both surfaces you want to stick together, then let it dry until it's tacky and stick the parts together. Here's what you should end up with. And here are the finished shoulder bells. Now let's move on to the biceps. They each need 3 5mm strips of EVA foam, which you can cut using the template as a reference. I rounded those parts before gluing them to the biceps, still with contact cement. Once you're done, heat up the bicep parts and form them into cylinders to make it easier to glue them closed. And that looks good. Moving on to the forearms, the concept is the same as for the biceps, with big parts for the base and strips of 5mm foam glued on top for additional detail. After rounding the edges with the rotary tool, simply glue them on to the base parts. After that, a quick heat forming and some gluing is all that's needed to finish up the forearms. The last parts to assemble are the hand plates. These are the ones from A New Hope. Start by rounding the edges of the 8mm parts. After that, connect all the parts together using the letters and registration marks as reference. This looks pretty good. Finally, here is the other option for hand plates. They also go together super easily. I decided to heat form the hand plates just a little bit. Here are all the parts from file number 1 finished. Something I highly recommend is to round off all the remaining edges on the parts. The Stormtrooper armors from the movies are made from vacuum formed plastic, which naturally gives parts rounded edges. This helps imitate that. Finally, a quick heat seal over all the parts will prep them for painting. And I'm really happy with how the parts came out. You can modify all of them to fit you better. If the biceps are too large, you can trim off a strip of foam and glue them back up. If they're too long, simply trim off the bottom a little bit. Same thing goes for the forearms. You can remove a strip from their length and trim some of the bottom. It's finally time for file number 2 of the armor. Just like with the templates of file number 1, trim off the borders, tape the pages together and cut out all the parts. There's a lot of parts in file number 2, so this process might take a while. After that, trace the parts to the foam, making sure to transfer the registration marks and the letters as needed, along with the dashed and dotted lines for angled cuts. Some parts, like this one, have edges that start as straight cuts and become angled cuts. You can indicate those cuts by adding dots on the parts that are further and further apart as you get to the straight part of the cut. This part here can simply be cut from 5mm foam, or you can cut it from 2mm foam and glue on half foam dowels afterwards. With your 8, 5 and 2mm foam parts traced, you can start carefully cutting them out. Here's one of the angled to straight cuts I mentioned earlier. You have to cut that line in one shot, starting at 90 degrees and slowly transitioning to a 40-degree inward angle cut. Here is the result. Those two parts have inward and outward angle cuts. Outward angle cuts are the same as the inward angle cuts from earlier for the hand plates, but you need to angle the blade away from the part. Here is the result. It's finally time to assemble the chest plate using the 6 parts you see here. Those 2 parts have lines on them which you can transfer to the back. Those need to be V-grooves. The way you make those is you cut at an angle towards the line but not all the way through the foam. Then simply flip the piece around and do the same to the other side. You should be able to peel out a strip of foam and be left with a V-channel in your part. Add some glue inside the channel and close it to give the parts a nice tight bend. Now you can glue those parts on each side of the bigger piece. After that, connect the 2 diamond-shaped parts together and glue them to the bottom of the chest plate. You can then glue on the final piece on the bottom. And here's the finished chest plate. Here are all the parts to make the back plate. Let's start by rounding the edges on the inside of this frame and those 3 parts. After quickly sealing those parts, I glued each of them to the rectangular base. Now simply connect each of the 4 parts surrounding the rectangular base piece, and your back plate is done. Here are the shoulder straps, which are made from the 2mm rectangular parts with half foam dowels glued on top. You can glue those straps to the chest plate and back plate. It's time to make the abdominal section using the parts you see here. Start by scoring halfway through the foam on all those lines on this part. Heating up the part will open up those cuts, giving us some nice panel lines. Now connect the 2 bigger parts together to make the base of the abdominal section. Before gluing on the other parts, I recommend rounding their edges with the rotary tool. Start by gluing on those 4 5mm parts. After that, build up the control panel with these 3 parts and glue it on the base. The abdominal section also needs 9 little buttons, which I cut from 5mm foam. I simply glued them on with super glue. And that looks good. The lower back plate is made from the 3 parts you see here. Start by rounding the edges on the center piece and stick on the 2 side pieces. Make sure they sit about 2 or 3mm lower to give a nice 3D effect to the piece. Once the 3 parts of the upper body are done, I recommend rounding the edges of all of the parts. As I said earlier, this is important to make the armor look less like EVA foam and more like plastic. Finally, I sealed and heat formed the parts into their final shapes with my heat gun. Here's how to make the parts fit you perfectly. The abdominal and lower back parts go together like this and can be slid into each other for a tighter fit. For the chest and back plates, if they sit too low, you can cut the straps shorter. As for the sides, they don't need to touch like on Clone Trooper armor, so this part should fit anyone without changing anything. With that done, the first half of your Stormtrooper armor is finished. Surprisingly, this is one of the easier armors to make using my templates, and this is thanks to the simple design. In the next video of this series, I'll show you how to build the lower half of the armor, and then we'll move on to the painting process. As I said at the start of the video, if you want to make this project, the templates are available over in my Etsy store, which is linked in the video description. This is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, you can leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more cool builds like this one. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.